to the festival pack or just to nudgestock.co.uk, you'll see the lineup for the rest of the day. So we're in the first few hours of a mega event, so please do go and see who's coming up to make sure you put your alarms on. Coming up in the next hour and rounding up the leg of the Asia Pacific stretch of Nudgestock 2020, we'll have consumer psychologist Adam Ferrier. But right now, I'm joined by Anjali Kelkar. Now, Anjali is founder and director of the Studio Design Research in Hong Kong. Really thrilled that Anjali is here to join us to catalyze the ooh and the ah into the aha. It can be quite frequent when we look at how the West might get Eastern insights wrong, that we see this as a challenge. And we see this as something that we need to right side. We need to bridge the gap. Anjali has a fantastic experience to actually expose where these cultural differences can be amazing opportunities for growth in brands. Anjali will share 5 short cases to show how these differences in culture can be converted into opportunities. I'm really thrilled to be able to bring Anjali to the virtual stage for Nudgestock 2020. Welcome, Anjali Kelkar.
Thank you very much, Sam. Very, very excited to be part of Nudgestock 2020. So let me get started ASAP since we have limited time. So pivoting from the ooh and ah to the aha. Our design and research and ethnography consulting services are focused on Asia. We help companies uncover user needs and discover the aha to guide innovation strategy. So there's been ample talk about how the West gets the East wrong, but I think it's really about what our instant reaction to new human behavior usually is. For instance, let's just talk about eating. If this is the first time you ever saw anybody eat with their hands, you're probably going to be in complete shock. There's going to be disbelief, and you're going to be absolutely shocked that you notice that not even one grain of rice falls away and all of it is eaten deftly. You might see this for the first time in your hands and be first time in front of yourself and be surprised. What? How are people eating with 2 sticks, which you later are told these are chopsticks? And again, you notice how deftly people are consuming their food. And of course, they're looking very healthy with this way of consumption. This is your instant reaction when you see something that you have never seen before. You're like, oh, ah. On the other hand, imagine the first time somebody from the East looks at a dining table like this, and they ask themselves, wow, why would you miniaturize farm implements and display them at dinner? We're not going to war, we're going to go eat. It's a social event. So the idea is that the first time we see something new, we have an instant reaction, right? And it's this shock, it's excitement, amazement. Sometimes we're disgusted, sometimes we're in awe. But really, this is just an observation, right? When this is our instant reaction to what we've seen, and it simply is an observation. And this visual describes that observation. This visual, as you see here, you see a pair of chopsticks, a fork, and a hand, and it's simply a descriptor of what we saw. Getting it right is about digging deep into the why. Why is this behavior occurring? Why are people using these implements or these tools? And that means that we mustn't stop at an observation. So the question to ask, to reframe our observation, how might we gather user data to mine insights of gold and get it right? How might we get that observation that we just saw? How might we make sense of it? And this is what I call moving from the ooh, ah, to the aha, right? How do we get insights that are worth their value in gold, right? This brings me to Margaret Mead, a famous American anthropologist who used to say, what people do, what people say, what people do, and what they say they do are entirely different things, right? So it's important to understand that if you ask somebody something, they will give you an instant response. But actually being in their context gives you a deeper understanding of where the response comes from. So over the next few slides, I will share some examples from companies I have consulted with who have had the courage of getting it right. Because getting it right requires you to step back from the wonderful strategy you had for customer innovation and reframe everything. So quickly, a little bit background about what I do. Design research and ethnography seek to understand the research question from a user perspective while being in their context, right? So this is very critical. There are three things that is very critical to our practice. The first one is to apply the user's lens and not ours, right? Because we want to break assumptions about users. We want to break the ideas we have about how somebody else behaves and acts. And then being in their context, so being in their environment, it helps act as a memory trigger to the user so that they can generate real stories about their life and experiences. And this helps us understand them better. Behavior is largely informed by an individual's motivations and goals, right? People behave in a certain way because there's an action they need to conduct. There is something they need to do. And in order to do it, they behave in a certain way. So understanding why people do what they do and where they do it gives us a deep understanding of the context, the place where the activity is occurring. What are the pain points in carrying out that activity? And what innovation does the user undertake or create in order to have a seamless experience to get to their goal? So very quickly, this is the inside of a taxi, right? Now, this is not, you see a plastic box in front of you. This is not the taxi driver expecting you to give him tips, right? That would be a ooh and ah. But the aha here really is the fact that this is an elderly taxi driver and he can't swivel around all the time to take change from the customer. So he's conveniently created a workaround so you can pay him, the change can lie in the box and he can carry on. Right? And that actually becomes your aha that can help you reframe your challenge question. Another example here, you see an air cooler. This is a home in northern urban India. And the immediate ooh and ah would be, oh, people like fresh air, so they have a mobile air cooler. It actually isn't that. The aha here, the behavior and the motivations behind this is that they conduct this activity throughout, they conduct this activity throughout winter. And in summer, when it gets really hot, this air cooler helps them seamlessly continue that socializing behavior. Because you see, in these people's homes, they don't have bedrooms and living rooms. There is one room, and that's meant for storage. And the rest of your time you spend outside. So this aha becomes critical to product innovation. So back to this, that the aha leads us to these insights of gold. And very important to remember that innovation often lies at the cusp of these workarounds. So stop wearing sunglasses in the dark. So I'd like to share three quick case studies that help reframe business strategy, communication, and branding for three clients who are based in the West. The first is healthcare industry. The location was Philippines. And our research brief was, how might we understand what products and services to innovate for the needs of young Filipino moms from low-income urban communities? Now, they had done the requisite market research. They knew that young women from these low-income backgrounds are often left by their partners when they discover that they're pregnant. They do not have access to great healthcare. They are not conscious of nutrition and well-being for mom and child. And as well, many of them haven't completed high school and are sort of in this vicious cycle of low-paying jobs because they don't have the right qualifications. So the context was right. And so we went into the field, and really the assumption was that we would validate the context and the data we had with stories about how horrendous the life of these young, financially poor moms in urban areas of the Philippines was. Guess what? We discovered a big aha. It wasn't the young mom at all. It was the grandmother, her mother, who bore the entire responsibility of raising the child. this is one of our respondents who cried, and she cried 5 times within the 2 hours that we interviewed her. She said, "I'm always stressed. I cry a lot. I'm so worried. If not for me, who will raise these children? My daughter will go overseas. My other daughter will go back to work. It's me. I am the second mom. I take care of all of their needs." And so essentially it turned out that the mom, this grandmom, she's the commander-in-chief of the family. The family is massive. People live in extended families, and it's almost like homes within homes. The pregnant girl, for her, pregnancy is me time. I'll relax and get spoiled. In fact, for her, it was no issue at all getting pregnant because mom and rest of the family was going to take care of her. This would be the first time for her that she gets me time. So this was a massive awakening. And even though initially the client was quite upset and said, "What? You have no insights about the young mother?" I said, "No, the insights are all about grandma. Grandma runs this home. We need to rethink what our strategic direction would be." And so the client gave up the initial idea of how might we design for the needs of young Filipino moms from low-income urban communities, and changed it. The strategic reframe now was how might we innovate services and solutions to empower and facilitate grandma to provide her best to raise baby. So the second case study is set in Vietnam, and this was for the energy industry. It was again an example where the client had done enough research and they had some concept ideas, and they were hoping to get validation through the research they had done. In this case, they had conducted ethnographic research and they wanted us to help them design a solution. So the research brief was, "We have conducted ethnographic research. Could your team help us make sense of it to innovate a new solution that uses clean fuel?" The target was low-income communities at the periphery of urban areas in Vietnam. And we were surprised. We were not shocked. We were a bit surprised. It was like, huh, what? You have a solution. It's embedded in your research question. Why would you need us to make sense of data? But, this is what we do. We try to make sense of data and then try to help our client, reframe their understanding of where they should go ahead. When we analyzed the data, we saw indeed the circumstances in which users were cooking and eating were indeed difficult situations. People lived in makeshift homes and their setups were very makeshift. And indeed, a cooking solution with clean fuel, because many times people cooked indoors and the smoke fumes would be terrible for their health. Indeed, a cooking solution with clean fuel could be fantastic. So we brought this ahead and came up with 50 concept ideas because our client was insistent that we have to move forward and create cooking solutions, and that an analysis of the data should help us design a better cooking solution. And so this was getting very interesting. And so we decided to take our workshop into the next stage because we realized that just designing a cooking solution was not going to solve this problem. It was quite clear that there was something else going on there. So we proposed to the client, why don't we actually try making a lo-fi paper prototype and start seeing how this cooking solution is actually going to work. And mind you, this cooking solution was like a super cooking solution. It had everything possible in it that could be retractable. It was mobile. It was modular. Pieces could be attached. Pieces could be removed. I mean, it was just becoming absolutely magnificent. But as we started making the paper prototype, my client turns around and looks at me, and this was the real aha. He says, "Oh, this looks quite pointless, doesn't it? With so much flexibility, it's going to be very costly too. Kind of defeats the purpose, doesn't it?" And this was absolutely wonderful. This was a wonderful exercise because it's only when we actually started building this lo-fi, cheap, it costs us nothing prototype with the client getting their hands dirty that they realized this was not going to make any sense, even though they had all this data, knowing that this may not work. So they canned their idea of designing a cooking solution with a clean fuel, but continued with this idea of clean fuel and reframed their strategy to how might we engage in value creation and provide job opportunities within these communities to sell clean fuel. And then they, in fact, went on to do the same in South Africa, the same strategic reframe. Lastly, I'd like to talk about a completely different industry. This is corporate real estate. This was done for a Western multinational company that does FMCG goods in Guangzhou, China. The research brief here was that in preparation to successfully conduct a change management program, we were to observe how current space was being used and identify if spaces were being used as designed. One of the design principles I'd like to show some slides about is the one that talked about provide personal workspaces in public areas like the cafe with views to the outside. Now, this is a fantastic design principle. We all know when we work in offices, it gets boring to look at office furniture and artificial light. And oh, it's so lovely when it's a beautiful day to peek outdoors and get some fresh air. But this insight was clearly written in a Western context because in Asia, many other things happen. We don't like the sun so much. We like it when it's sunny, but we don't sit out in the sun. And the light here is really very bright. So it's very difficult to actually take your laptop and sit anywhere where there's bright light. So this in itself was a bit of a challenge. But what we found was this. So the spaces that they had designed for fresh views, outside views, natural light, turned into something else. And this was a complete shock. Why were these wonderful bar spaces with individual plug points and lovely bar stools turned into a working kitchen? So it had moved from a working cafe into a working kitchen. That entire space, they had large refrigerators that were full of fresh food, fresh ingredients, condiments, and people cooked fresh food, and this is how they ate. So what was aha? However gorgeous, the cafe was perceived as the employee kitchen and not the employee space to work and reflect. This was a massive discovery because in understanding people's behavior and their motivations, we understood the aha, right? In Asia, there's a growing sense of health consciousness. People don't want to eat out. They want to source their own food. People also like their meals hot. A cold sandwich is a total compromise on the idea of eating. And lunchtime is key socializing time. Sitting by yourself at that bar would be considered very strange. So we had to help the company reframe their original design principle, which was provide spaces in public areas like the cafe for views to the outside, to a greater keeping flexibility as a core. We helped them reframe this to how might we amplify flexibility in our public spaces so local cultures in our global locations can thrive. Because mind you, while this was happening in China, there would be a different mood and ambience for how that space would be used in India. So this helped broaden the insight, yet keep the core principles together. So in conclusion, I'd like to just reiterate that it's really critical to move beyond our initial reaction of, what a lovely observation, to understanding the motivations of why people behave in certain ways and get to the gold. Get to the aha. Thank you.
Anjali, fantastic. Thank you so much for that presentation and for sort of taking us through discovery, behavior, motivation, aha. I feel like there is a rhyme there that we can play with moving forwards. Thoroughly enjoying that, and some great questions coming through on Slido. So we've got a bit of time to respond to those. First question from Andy. What, in your opinion, are some of the best strategies to arrive at the aha? And is this beyond surveys, interviews? What strategies might we arm our viewers with?
Yeah, I think typically I my hope, and I always try to do this, I try to do pre-research, and then I try to do in-context research. And this, of course, requires time, and not always do we have this time. Pre-research actually requests research participants to document their daily life using, whatever products they may want. What happens here is they're showing me their life from their viewpoint. I haven't yet entered their home. I haven't disturbed their sense of comfort. And then I can go back into their home and say, hey, you took these pictures of your daily life. Tell me more. And tell me more, it really requires a level of, confidence, because you know that you're going to get a lot of stories and you'll get a lot of vague answers. But the aha lies in that, really probing down to understand, well, what was happening here? What excited you?
So it sounds like digital technology is giving you access to moments that we might not have seen, that then is enabling you to probe and maybe go a little bit deeper.
Well, actually, digital technology is making it faster and helping me do more of it. In the old days, we used to send them disposable cameras.
Yes.
And it was a lot better because people didn't fix their pictures and didn't fix their homes and didn't do makeup. So we got more honest information.
So culture is catching up to that research. Another question, and this is from MG on Slido. Often, I think in a few examples in the presentation just now, around where research sort of validated assumptions that we might have moving forwards. Wondering if you might be able to share your approach in the discussions with stakeholders, with funders, when research didn't support the assumptions, and how you might have managed those conversations to deliver the end result.
Yeah, that's a fantastic question, because that is usually why strategic direction doesn't get reframed, because it's too much trouble going back to the stakeholders. And so I think this is why ethnography is critical, because ethnography gives you evidence-based data. It's not hearsay. It's not that I heard somebody say something. I'm showing you in the 12 homes that I researched that grandma is actually taken charge of everything. I have the evidence, because it is, in fact, this client who came back to me and she said, but where's the mom research? There is no mom here, right? And so we had to use this evidence-based data to change the mindset of who they should be targeting their customer with. So I think that evidence is a very critical part of creating the argument.
And then I wonder also the way in which that evidence is delivered. Sometimes we might find with sort of very quant-centric mindsets, what's the way in which we can sort of codify that insight, visualize that insight in a way that makes it feel.
So actually, one of the things I always beseech my clients is, give me some of your people. So because when I have some of their people actually in context with me, even for 15 minutes, half the work is done, because they have seen for themselves what is going on. Right?
Yes.
The second thing is that the nature of my work is not quantifiable. So I don't have the metrics and the data. So this will definitely be the softer stuff. And I will always present visuals, videos. And the idea would be the end of the presentation should culminate in all of us co-creating ideas. Gotcha. So that we can look back and say, look, these were the user needs we identified. This innovation, this idea, 30-second sketch addresses that user need that we identified from research.
And finding this gold, the aha, and certainly if it's found in the sort of the tension from a cultural perspective, takes courage and bravery for multinationals to act and maybe change their behaviours in a particular market. Keen to know whether your approach, your experience, sort of managing sort of courageous decisions on the ground where things need to be bent to unlock an opportunity that otherwise wasn't seen.
More, excuse me, I didn't say that again. Sorry.
Just keen to understand the courage, I suppose, for some multinationals to change an expectation or pivot an assumption that might exist globally into a particular market. That to change that for a brand or a service, I suspect takes guts.
Yes.
Lovely to know again, and whether that's part of the discussion around sort of delivering the insight. Just keen to know if you have any tips for our audience on that.
Yeah, so I think, look, it doesn't always happen. many times, and I have been in loops, research loops, where I've actually had to do validation for a concept that was designed 6 months back from my research, and there has been no change. The concept has remained the same after all of this research. So it does happen. There isn't, you can't sort of go in there as a warrior and say, no, I have to break this down, right? It does require a mindset towards change. And that's why one of the critical things is, who are you sending with me when I do the research? I'm a big proponent of give me your people when I do research. Everything I do is transparent. I don't want to be the consultant who goes off and says, this is my precious stuff, you can see it now. Right. So in one instance, I had a scientist with me in a research project in China. And he says, oh, my God, I wish I'd been in a home study before. I wouldn't have spent all this time in a lab designing fragrances that no one was going to buy. It's quite clear no one will buy this. So I think that's part of the trick, is to be very transparent and open.
Transparent and open. And it sounds also just bringing people on the journey, because there's a final question up on slide 2 is how we sort of can convince clients and partners that spending time in 12 houses, for example, is a representative enough of a sample for the information that we need.
Absolutely. So that's usually the beginning of all conversations. The idea is that after about 12 to 15 samples, you'll start getting the same responses. In fact, frankly, because I've been doing this for over 2 decades, after 4 homes, I start getting the same responses. But you do want some more data to enrich in your stuff. The idea is that ethnographic research will not give you your large sample sizes. Ethnographic research works with small sample sizes. You do deep and rich research. So you sort of have an idea of what it is that you're going to look for. This is not some big blue space ocean that you've been thrown in, right? So you will never come back with an answer that will suffice. Well, there should be 5,000 samples. That won't work. No company has the time to do ethnography for 500 people.
That's really important, I think, building on Chiara Varazani earlier in the day around purpose-built methodologies for the answers that we want. Again, it's what's the question that we need answered, what's the influence that we need to shape, and then how can we build the right argument to make it so. Anjali Kelkar, it's been such a pleasure having you for Nudgestock Global. Thank you so much for joining us.